Hello, everybody. It's Lee again. Um, Today, I'd like to start off by saying that I'm sorry I haven't updated in a little while. I've been quite busy this past week doing preparations for classes, and I had a conference to go to last week. And in my prefectural group of ALTs, um, we've been putting on musicals. Been putting on a musical. Um, we're doing rehearsals and things like that, and it looks like it's going to come together pretty awesomely. So I'm excited about that. And I'll try to post at least one video a week. That I think that is at the very least doable. I'd like to be able to post one video a day, but we'll see how that goes in the near future. Um, Once the musical's over, I'll have a lot more time on my hands, so I'll be able to update more on things that I'd like to talk about for this channel. And today, I would like to talk about um, standardized testing uh, for language learning. Um, as a general rule, I don't really think standardized testing really helps you that much. Um, it doesn't gauge actual language ability, um, except for your vocabulary, the extent of your vocabulary, um, and your perhaps your ability to interpret text, um, and to understand the meaning. But as far as improving your communication skills, it doesn't really do that good of a job. Um, However, it does provide a motivation for you to study more on vocabulary and grammar and that sort of thing. Um, in fact, I recently took the JLPT, or the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. Uh, I took it several months ago, but I got the results back. I didn't pass. It was a very hard test, but I intend to try again. Um, these standardized testing procedures, they do have an advantage for me. It does give you a higher professional status if you wish to work in Japan. Um, if you achieve level 2, the JLPT has 5 levels, 5 being the lowest and 1 being the highest. If you pass level 2, um, you become a lot more employable. If you try to search for work outside of being an ALT, um, I would have to say, at least for Americans, ALT work is in very high demand, and it's a lot easier to get into if you don't speak so much Japanese. But anyway, that I'm also about to take a different kind of test, and that is the Kanji Kente. This is a preparatory book that I'm using. Um, I'm taking level 6, and this is, for those who don't know, kanji are um, characters that are based on the Chinese language that were imported into the Japanese language. And they're basically units of meaning. Each character represents an idea, and it's used to form vocabulary or uh, maybe idioms and things like that. But this is actually a test that national Japanese citizens strive for. My students, actually, who are middle school students, are taking this test fairly soon as well. I think they'll be taking level 3. Either 3 or 2. Probably 2. Because I think level 2 is at the point of where you can pretty much read most materials, like newspapers and magazines and novels and that sort of thing. I'm taking level 6. This is at a just past the elementary level, I believe. By the time a elementary school student graduates to middle school, they will have achieved the kanji that go up to level 6. And I think that's around close to 700 or so characters. And I can read a lot more than that, but I have to be able to write it for the purposes of this test. It's a very complicated test. But I decided to take that as a way to motivate myself, to give myself a goal. And each time I pass one of these tests, I'll try to go to the next level. They're offered 2 to 3 times a year. But if you study Japanese and you'd really like to study kanji in particular, I do recommend taking this test, the Kanji Kente, or Kanken for short. Even though it is meant for Japanese citizens, anybody can take it, as long as they have reached the appropriate level and they believe that they can pass it. I recommend trying to take it. Now, I've only talked really about the standardized testing formats in Japan. I do think, however, that perhaps the tests based on the European framework of language might be a little bit better structured. I've only taken one of those tests, called Test DAF. I took it several years ago, so I don't quite remember it very well. But it stands for Deutsch als Fremdsprache, or German as a foreign language. And the European framework of tests ranges from A1 to C2, C2 being a very high standard of fluency, where you can understand most texts that you read, even of like high caliber texts, I would say, like research texts. But again, I say it's a little bit better structured because I think that in some cases they do test your oral abilities. I wasn't tested whenever I took it, but for certain types of tests that fit into that framework, it does test your oral ability. However, yeah, it's just a test. I would never use the results of a test to gauge your personal feeling about how fluent you are in a given language. Fluency is very subjective, I think. As far as how I consider myself in each of the foreign languages that I speak, my strongest ones being Japanese and German, I feel like my general conversational fluency is very high. I do find it difficult to understand complicated subjects, such as those related to science or history or anything very high level or within a technical field is difficult for me to understand. But it's not impossible. I could figure it out if I really studied it hard enough. So I guess in that regard, I could consider myself fluent because I do have the ability to communicate with people effectively and to express mostly anything. I have been able to get by in very complicated situations. Like I've had to set up my own bank account by myself in Japan before. I did that when I studied abroad. It was a very, very complicated situation, but I got through it. So in that way, I do consider myself fluent. Um, but I would try to gauge for yourself how you feel personally about your fluency. Are you able to communicate with people easily? Are you uh, able to get by in everyday life? I think that is a better way to gauge your fluency than a standardized test. The only thing that a test is useful for, as far as the tests based on the European framework and the JLPT, are for professional uses only. Um, if you don't wish to work in the country of the language that you speak, then maybe those tests wouldn't be so necessary for you. Um, but yeah, those are just my opinions on testing. It's something that I've had on my mind a lot lately because my students are taking tests. Um, and in a way, I feel that sometimes those tests, uh, their their preparation for the tests take away from opportunities that they could be using to improve their actual communication skills. So even as you're preparing for a test, don't forget that you need to be able to improve your ability to actually communicate with people. The tests aren't everything. So that's all I have to say about that. Please let me know what you all think about the useful or uselessness of standardized testing in regards with language learning. I would be happy to see what different opinions people have to say about that. So leave comments below and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.